And we're back. Greetings, everyone. This is Lucian Vâlsan, broadcasting from Cluj-Napoca, Transylvania. As always, alongside with me is Jon Gunnarsson, broadcasting from Deutschland, and our producer, James Huff, making sure everything works just fine, broadcasting from the States. Greetings, Jon, and welcome to the No Title episode.
Literally not even a title. If so much news to bring you, we couldn't even afford a title.
Yep. I just realized that right about now. Like, holy shit, I forgot to put a title. Well, tough. Anyway, before we go to the very long news section, which is long for many reasons, one of them is because there was no show last week, and there will be no show next week either. So we're going to try to fit as much as possible within this episode. But before we go there, how's been the weather on your end?
It's kind of been changing all the time. There's been a couple of days where it's like oppressively hot sunshine, and other days where it's been raining. Today it's been sort of a combination of both, so that we had rain in the morning, which sort of cooled things down a bit. But now it's sun has come out, and now it's basically hot and humid. So, guess sort of the worst of both worlds.
So I guess you guys sent the rain this way, because it started raining about 2 hours ago here, and now it somewhat stopped a little bit. And I hear from my friends in the east that it's starting to rain on their end. So basically, there's probably an annoying rain event. I would say, about it's obviously a cloud formation that's traveling westwards to eastwards. Right. Well, at the very least, we have decent temperatures, so there's that. I don't have to. I don't need 3 air conditioning devices simultaneously, so I can breathe. So that's fantastic. Right. Considering that it's very long news, let's try to apply your German efficiency on it. But until then, let's go with the first one, coming from the BBC. Mothers are an unseen force in honor abuse. Mothers are the unseen force behind the so-called honor-based abuse, inflicting violence on their daughters, a study has found. Research by Rachel Aplin, a criminologist from Leeds Beckett University, said this was often unrecognized by police. Of the 100 honor crimes she studied, 49 involved mothers, but this was often not recorded in crime reports. Cases included violence to daughters, sometimes to induce an abortion. She said the focus on any action taken against perpetrators should be on both males and females. Mrs. Aplin, a senior lecturer in criminology at the university, is on a career break from her role as a police detective sergeant. She said, quote, "The level of involvement of mothers in these cases was a real surprise, as was the level to which this wasn't acknowledged in police reporting. As many victims are children, there is a risk that agencies place them back in their mother's care, mistakenly believing that this will ensure their protection. Law enforcement and social services need to reassess their strategies for dealing with honor-based abuse, taking full account of the role of mothers to ensure children and young women are not returned to or remain in dangerous situations," end quote. Sadir, who was born in Bradford to Afghan parents, was taken into care after being abused by her mother, who tried to force her into marriage. Speaking to the BBC, she described her mother as the main perpetrator, saying she was regularly beaten as a child. From the age of 9, she was told she could not play out, but had to learn how to cook in order to be marriage material. Now 35, she said, "I would get psychologically battered if I didn't cook chapatis or if the chapatis weren't round enough. My mom would get the rolling pin out and physically chastise me with it. So she'd punish me, and then when dad came home, he'd punish me also because I didn't listen to my mom. I felt numb, sore. I was in shock. I couldn't believe she would hit me with a rolling pin, but then after a while you got used to it and it was a normal experience getting hit. You wouldn't dare tell anyone you were getting physically chastised at home. You just keep it to yourself and go to school and come back." At 13 years old, she came home to her own surprise engagement party after her mother had planned for her to marry her adult cousin in Afghanistan, whom she had never met. "We never used to have guests around, so I asked my mom whose party and she said it's an engagement party. I said, 'Well, who's getting married?' I got a bit excited, and she said, 'Well, it's your engagement party. I want you to go upstairs and get dressed.' I was presented with a photo of a man, my mom's nephew in Afghanistan. I was supposed to marry this guy. I never met him. He was an adult and I was 13. From that day onwards, I knew I was going to run away." Honor abuse is usually associated with women from Muslim, Sikh, or Hindu backgrounds and happens when they are seen to have shamed their community. It can also affect men, with some charities saying male abuse is underreported. In Mrs. Aplin's research, the abuse perpetrated by mothers included hitting, kicking, and slapping, assault with household objects, cutting off daughters' hair, and deception in order to encourage a fleeing victim back home. Other behaviors, including threatening to kill the victim or throw them downstairs, bartering to sell them, false imprisonment, emotional blackmail, confiscation of passports, bank cards, and mobile phones, and emotional blackmail. Mrs. Albin said, quote, the instinctive reaction from the public and from police officers and social workers is that mothers protect and nurture and love their children. But actually, we need to rethink that. Mothers are the key perpetrators in abuse against daughters, and this is mostly abuse pre marriage. So it's not necessarily abuse against wives once they've been forced into marriage. Yasvinder Sanghera founded the charity Karma Nirvana to support the victims of honor abuse and forced marriage, which currently receives about 850 calls a month. She said, quote, what they need to acknowledge is that when they are risk assessing or investigating cases, they have also got to consider women as suspects so that they are investigating them, they are holding them to account. They need to be recognizing that the victims are not safe with these females. Close quote. Well, duh.
Yep. But it
Uh,
is nice that the mainstream media is finally acknowledging these sorts of things.
Yeah, all it took is for a police sergeant who is in a career break, probably to have a child or whatever, and who's playing part-time lecturer at a university, and who happens to be a woman and probably of a minority background, to just go to the BBC and said, "Look, I actually have a study to prove that, well, actually women aren't angels." Just saying. Uh, that's all it took. Because it's not like these things haven't been spoken about since uh, forever. For Because it's the same situation with other sort of crimes. For instance, now my notes are wrong here. Most perpetrators of female circumcision or female genital mutilation, they're almost always grandmothers and mothers. It's not the patriarchal tradition of oppressing fathers who impose that on girls. It's mothers. And in many of these situations, I don't know if you got the chance to see Martyrs of Marriage um,
Nope.
by Deepika in India. It's the same thing. It's almost always in these kinds of situations. It's almost always the matriarch of the family, the mother, or sometimes the grandmother, if the grandmother happens to have been a woman of high status in her time. It's almost always in these kinds of situations. Now, the reverse is true. Also, the most harsh punishments and whatnot imposed upon sons are usually imposed by fathers. Uh, but the one of the things that probably leads to these kinds of to the underreporting of these issues, mothers committing honor-based violence against daughters and fathers committing honor-based violence against sons, is because many of these police systems and whatnot have been trained to view things in an entirely different paradigm than in which they are taking place.
Yeah, I mean, that's this sort of pernicious narrative that's been perpetrated by feminists, but also by sort of traditional conservatives that sort of views traditional cultures as patriarchal, and therefore it's only men in charge and women basically do almost nothing.
Mhm.
Whereas with pretty much every culture throughout all of history, both women and men play important roles in shaping the various institutions and customs of that culture. And to ignore the role that women play is just stupid. And that's really a way of really downplaying the sort of power and influence that women have had throughout the ages. And I would say that's actually quite sexist.
Yeah, it is sexist, but more important is detrimental to the victims of these kinds of things. Um, Now, the article says to try to save face a little. Oh, it is characteristic to Sikh and Hindu and Muslim families. No, it's almost always Muslim. Let's be very honest about these things. It does happen in Hindu cultures, but in India, not in the United Kingdom. But nevertheless, in Hinduism, for instance, it's probably by far the most women worshipping culture that exists on present in the current year on the planet. I mean, the Hindus have been worshipping women literally, not metaphorically, for thousands and thousands of years, long before Christianity or Islam existed. And in Islam, as if you remember our interview that we had with the chap from AVFM Farsi,
Ali Merashpand.
Ali Mehrashpan, yeah, is almost all. He also told us that almost always when you see these kinds of weird things that, well, at least they seem weird for us coming from a Christian culture. Um, it, Almost all of these things are usually superimposed by women. For instance, the wearing of the hijab and whatnot. Even if you don't have a religious police, it's almost always mothers who impose it or grandmothers. It's never men. Or very rarely it's men.
Yeah, and that's just something that is just really disturbing to me, and something that I just find really annoying. That lots of people just completely undervalue the agency of women, and they just somehow seem to think that these women are just completely meek and innocent, and they don't do anything, and all their lives are completely determined by the men in their lives, when that's just nothing like the reality is. And I mean, pretty much everyone in his life has the experience that the women play an important role in society, in families. So it's really puzzling to me why so many people believe in this fiction that women just have no power and that they're just treated as objects or something like that, when that has never been true in any society.
Yep. It's even worse than the women are wonderful effect. It's just like that guy from the Objectivist Institute called it 30 years ago. There's nothing more misogynistic than the feminist narrative in and of itself, because it's the feminist narrative uniquely that argues that women have no role. It really is. No other narrative that has or is in power in any area of the world argues in such an extreme fashion. Neither is Islam, nor is Hinduism, nor is any previously in power narrative anywhere.
Yeah, and it's also something where the right or the conservative parts of in Western cultures just plays along because they want to criticize Islam and cultures like that. And so they completely buy into this feminist narrative that women have no power and they're completely oppressed. And it's just so annoying to hear people who I would say are sort of on my side, in inverted commas, perpetrate this sort of nonsense.
Yeah, that's true. They're criticizing Islam from a leftist perspective, essentially.
Basically, yes.
Yeah, to the right wingers listening to us, mates, Islam can be cancer without without the feminist bullshit superimposed on it. Seriously, it's just
yeah, and
right.
it's not a matter of us defending Islam. It's we're the ones who say that Islam is bad for men and for women.
Yeah, it's just bad in different ways, but it's still bad. Right. Speaking of women have no accountability and no agency, the next article is from the same pretty much vein, this time from an academic perspective.
Okay, academic perspective. Next one is from the Telegraph.
Yep.
Oh yeah, sorry. Shortage of eligible men has left women taking desperate steps to preserve their fertility, experts say. A dearth of marriageable men has left an oversupply of educated women taking desperate steps to preserve their fertility, experts say. The first global study into egg freezing found that shortages of eligible men were the prime reason why women had attempted to take matters into their own hands. Experts said terrifying demographic shifts had created a deficit of educated men and a growing problem of leftover professional women, with female graduates vastly outnumbering males in many countries. I'm not stuttering, I'm just reading the article, sorry. Apparently Telegraph has fired their editors. The study led by Yale University involved interviews with 150 women undergoing egg freezing at 8 clinics. Researchers found that in more than 90% of cases, the women were attempting to buy extra time because they could not find a partner to settle down with amid a dearth of educated men. Experts said that the research busts the myth that selfish career women were choosing to out their fertility on ice, I guess to put their fertility on ice, in a bid to put their careers first. They said sweeping social changes meant that many professional women now struggled to find a partner that felt like an equal match. In recent decades, the gender balance at British University has tripped dramatically. In 1985, 45% of UK students were female, but 2000 or 54% were women. This group, now in the late 30s, is finding it harder to find a man with equal status, fertility experts said. And the trend is set to steepen in further generations, they warned, with nearly 6 in 10 current students female. The research, presented at the European Society for Human Reproduction and Embryology conference in Geneva, was based on detailed interviews with women in the United States and Israel. But the lead author said similar trends were likely in the UK, where women are 35% more likely than men to go to university. Professor Marcia Inhorn, a professor of anthropology at Yale University, said professional women found themselves losing out in a game of musical chairs because there were simply too few men of the same caliber to go around. Quote, there's a major gap. They are literally missing men. There are not enough college graduates for them. In simple terms, this is about an oversupply of educated women, she said. In China, they call them leftover women. It sounds cold and callous, but in demographic terms, this is about missing men and leftover women. The former president of the Society for Medical Anthropology said the women interviewed in the study were highly successful, with 81% having a college degree. Quote, these are highly educated, very successful women, and one after another they were saying they couldn't find a partner. How could it be that all these amazing, attractive, intelligent women were lamenting about their ability to find a partner, she said. The answer comes in the demographics, growing disparities in the education levels of men and women. The anthropologist suggested some women might need to be prepared to compromise some of the standards in order to find love. But she suggested society should act to increase the number of men going into higher education. Quote, maybe women need to be prepared to be more open to the idea of a relationship with someone not as educated. But also maybe we need to be doing something about our boys and young men to get them off to a better start. Some women were paying a high price for feminism, she suggested. As a feminist, I think it's great that women are doing so well, but I think there has been a cost that has been paid, she said, warning that many had been left in sadness and isolation. In some cases, the women taking part in the in-depth interviews said they would be happy to be in a relationship with someone less educated, but they felt they were intimidating to the men who were available. Researchers said that until now, many commentators on egg freezing had assumed that it was being driven by desire to preserve fertility while rising up the career ladder. Quote, I think this is an issue that has been misinterpreted so much. This idea of a selfish career woman putting her fertility on hold, said Professor Inhorn. Skipping a bit here. Professor Adam Balin, president of the British Fertility Society, said, we are seeing some big societal issues, in particular in some social and economic groups, with young men not committing. 1 in 5 women in the UK is now childless by the end of their fertile life, compared to 1 in 10 in the generation before, he said. Last year, less than 105,000 male 18-year-olds started university, compared with almost 135,000 females. UCAS figures show with more women than men on 2/3 of courses. British facility experts said the gulf was terrifying. Dr. Gillian Lockwood, executive director, IVI, said, it exacerbates the problem of men not wanting to settle down and start a family until it's almost too late for the woman to conceive naturally. And if she insists, it's quite likely to leave for a younger woman whose biological clock isn't ticking quite so loudly. Her own survey of women doing social egg freezing found the overwhelming majority of women having their eggs frozen were doing so because they could not find a partner or because their own partner would not commit. Typically, it costs around about £10,000 to freeze eggs and keep them in storage for 10 years in the UK. Professor Simon Fischel, founder of Care Fertility, said, anthropologically, we are always searching, consciously or unconsciously, for like-minded people, so it is not a great leap to understand that women are looking for someone on the same level who is university educated or a professional. Almost all of the women in the study who employed egg freezing were heterosexual and wanted to become married mothers, the research found. Women lamented the missing men in their lives, viewing egg freezing as a way to buy time while in the continuing online search for a committed partner. The study found that more than 90% of those freezing their eggs were not intentionally postponing their fertility because of education or careers. Uh, Rather, they were desperately preserving their fertility beyond the natural end of their reproductive lives because they were single without partners to marry. In most cases, these women were unable to find educated men willing to commit to family life, the reflection of a growing but little discussed gender trend, with women increasingly outnumbering male college graduates, the report found.
Boo-hoo, let me play you a song on the world's smallest violin. uh, yeah, I don't know. I just have a very, very hard time uh, having any degree of empathy with these ladies. I just can't. I can't.
So,
Sorry.
yeah, so for decades, um, feminists have been doing their best to make the education system more and more friendly towards women and girls, and more unfriendly towards men and boys. And as a result, we now have more women pursuing higher education than men. And now that's a problem too. It's they just want to
It's
have their
almost
cake and eat it too.
it's almost like there are no solutions, only trade-offs. It's almost like that, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's
Oh
almost
wait,
like
it's conservatives who've been saying that forever. Yeah. Anyway, go ahead, please.
yeah, and it's almost like being a career woman is not strictly superior to traditional gender roles. I mean, there are advantages, of course, to being a career woman. No one denies that. You get more money, you have more independence, and so on. That's certainly great upsides, but there are also downsides. And there are downsides to a society that very strongly encourages this seeking after a career as the ultimate path to fulfillment. And these are some of these downsides. And it, it's just baffling that no one in this article is in any way questioning that. No one that says, maybe instead of pursuing a career, it might be at least conceivable that you might try to start a family first or focus on that. I mean, it's not like saying that all women should do that or must do that, but at least some of them would, I definitely think, be happier doing that.
Especially the ones complaining now. Yeah, the closest thing to such an analysis is that portion where it says, "Oh, some women were paying a high price for feminism. It was suggested." That's the closest thing that they get to at least starting to question at least some of these narratives. But it doesn't go deep enough, and I like it. I like it when it says, "Hold on a second. Oh, crap! I lost the paragraph." The portion where it says that, "Oh, maybe." Quote unquote society should be doing something to help men and boys a little bit more to get them off to a better start. Oh, so now you give a shit. Really, really, how about you go fuck yourself? Really, now you give a shit when when the pampered when the sorry, the by far the most let me use their language, by far the most privileged group on the planet, that would be highly educated white women in the West. Now when they're having problem finding finding men to get married with and settle down and have a family, now you suddenly give a shit. Yeah, that's a bit too late, honey. That's a bit too late. Also, I have a big problem accepting this portion right towards the end of the article where it says the study found, quote, that more than 90% of those freezing their eggs were not intentionally postponing their fertility because of education or careers, close quote. How the hell do you know this? Um, maybe maybe they're not doing this now when they're freezing their eggs, but they have been doing it for the previous 15 years, haven't they? 15 or more.
Yeah, I mean, sort of the traditional thing to do was to get married at around age, I don't know, 20 or something, maybe even earlier in some cases,
Yep.
and start having children then. And women have not been doing that in the last couple of decades in the West. And there's advantages to that, but there are also drawbacks. For example, women are at their most fertile around age 20, and after that, it's fertility is still very high throughout the 20s, but after about 30, it really starts to drop off, and after about 40 or something, it really is not a good idea anymore to have children because
Yep.
the risk of any sort of birth defects and congenital diseases and so on starts rising drastically.
Yep.
And I mean, of course, there are disadvantages to you becoming pregnant in your 20s, but there are also advantages. And this sort of one-sided narrative that emphasizes careers over everything else is just really unhelpful. And I just think that a lot of women have been lied to, and they've been
Yep.
misled to think that that's the only way of finding fulfillment in life, and that it is somehow their duty to the sisterhood or something to become successful career women. There is no sisterhood. You don't have
Yep.
any duties to it. Do what you think is best for your life and for the people you care about. And if that means settling down and having children in your early 20s, then do that if that makes you happy. And if you want to be a career woman, you can be a career woman. But there shouldn't be this sort of really strong devaluation of motherhood, of viewing women focused primarily on the family as some sort of traitors to their sex or something like that. That's just nonsense.
Yeah, it's been an organized lie through omission by purposefully hiding all the advantages of being a homemaker and by purposely hiding all the disadvantages of being a careerist. And this has been going on for a very long time, both in Eastern Europe and in Western Europe, and in other parts of the world too, Japan as well, and North America, and of course. But what's really astonishing is that nowhere is it strongly suggested, an actual appeal to moderation, which is to say, maybe you should consider marrying down for a change. Maybe you should consider that the feminist narrative you've been sold is not a little bit with coming with a little bit of a price, but maybe mostly bullshit. Uh, there is no such appeal to moderation. Even the author who dissents a little bit from the narrative is a feminist herself. I mean, these people are completely unwilling to question anything from their quote unquote received wisdom.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that you have this thing called hypergamy, the tendency of women to marry up, that is to marry men of equal or higher status in themselves, and you very rarely see the opposite. You very rarely see a high status woman marrying a low status man. That seems to be something that is ingrained in us, probably not something we can change. And the thing is just, if you have a society where most of the high status positions are occupied by men, then hypergamy can work just fine. But if you get to a society where high status positions are sort of more evenly distributed, or even possibly in the future, we might get to a society where women hold more high status positions, then it's no longer going to work. I mean, if then it's just not possible for most women to marry someone who's have at least equal status. That's just not going to work mathematically anymore.
With that said, of course, hypergamy is a real thing, but it is a tendency, not necessarily an imperative. There are many other tendencies amongst both men and women that we as a species have either suppressed or diverted as civilization grew and developed the way it did, at least in the West. So, it is a tendency. Well, it's maybe time to do some to apply some trade-off to those tendencies. That would be definitely a very good short-term answer to some of these problems. Now, obviously, on the long-term, some transformations will be needed, either to retransform back society to something that could allow hypergamy to work as it used to work for, well, the last several thousands of years, or maybe even slowly divert that tendency away. I don't know, but the thing is that some steps will have to be made sooner or later, and simply avoiding suggesting that because, oh my god, we can't really offend women and say, well, maybe you should cut down some of that hypergamy. I don't think that's a very good start.
Yeah, definitely. It's also, of course, with the way that the institution of marriage has been changed over the last couple of decades, it's become less and less attractive for men to marry. And so
Absolutely.
a lot of these high status men that many women would desire are not actually that interested in marrying.
Mm-hmm.
And they tend to marry later in life, and they tend to, many of them just tend to stay single, or just have like girlfriends but don't actually marry them.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And
and
again,
that,
whose fault is that? Because again, with the risk of sounding like some of those angry MGTOWs on YouTube, and I really don't want to sound like them, but they do have a point in this regard. When considering general trends, one has to assume some generalizations, of course, with the risk of offending pretty much everyone. But at the end of the day, uh, if you are to use collectivist logic, which feminists always do, by the same collectivist logic, whose fault is it for all of these things that you've just described? And the obvious answer is pretty much women. Did women try to oppose any of these things that are obviously biting them from the ass right now? No, of course not. They were very glad to accept all the new privileges. Well, all the new privileges have a trade-off. Tough. That's why I said that I have a very very hard time to empathize with any of these ladies in this article. I just don't care. I'm like, yeah, cry me a river. Tough. Grow up. Woman up.
yeah, the thing is, if you make marriage a better and better deal for women and a worse and worse deal for men, then maybe you're helping the women who are already married, but it also means that less men are going to be willing to marry, because at the end of the day, you still have to get a man to agree to marry you for you to get the benefits offered
For
by
now.
marriage.
For now.
So
For now, you have to get a man to agree
for now, yeah.
until they'll try to make it mandatory. I can definitely see that happening in Sweden. Uh, yeah, no. The thing is that it's not one issue. Oh, it's women going more to college than men. It's not one issue that, oh, the institution of marriage has been borked and whatnot. It's a collection of issues. It's the colleges, it's the affirmative action, it's the quotas, it's the family courts. It's all of these things combined that have contributed gradually towards this state of affairs. That's why it's not one issue. This is probably one of the big difference between the men's rights movement and other movements such as the interactivists or other single issue groups, because we tend to look it's a collection of issues. There is no one answer or one issue that you just fix this and everything will be honky dory. Nah, it's not like that. Destroying the previous status quo took years, and it was a collection of steps that were taken. Destroying the current status quo to something hopefully better, it's going to take the same kind of route. It's more than one issue.
Yeah, and it's almost certain it's going to be a multi-decade process.
Oh yeah, for sure. Right, speaking of single issues, let's go to the next one.
Okay, coming from the BBC, mom opened nappy to find son had been circumcised. A mother has described the distress of discovering her baby son had been circumcised without her consent. The woman from Nottingham said she opened her son's nappy to find him covered in blood and was so distraught she had to leave the room. She has battled for 4 years for authorities to take action. 3 people have now been arrested, including a 61-year-old man thought to be a doctor on suspicion of grievous bodily harm with intent. I opened the nappy and I ended up having to leave the room because I felt hysterical, said the mother, who did not want to be identified. It was just awful, really. It wasn't very nice. There was all blood there and stuff. The boy was circumcised in July 2013 when he was 3 months old and apparently staying with his paternal grandparents who were Muslim. His mother originally contacted social services, then contacted Nottinghamshire police on 24th of November 2014. There was an investigation, but the force deemed it not to be a criminal matter, and the case was referred to the General Medical Council. The mother later got help from the anti-circumcision group Men Do Complain and leading human rights lawyer Simon Cahal QC, who wrote to Nottinghamshire Police. According to the British Medical Association, male circumcision in the UK is generally assumed to be lawful, provided there's valid consent. However, the mother believes it amounts to MGM, or male genital mutilation, and should be viewed in the same way as female genital mutilation, or FGM. Quote, "It's even illegal to duck dogs' tails. I've come home crying my eyes out thinking a dog has got more rights than my child. There's something seriously not right with it at all. You can protect a dog, you can protect a girl, but not a boy." After the letter from Ms. Chahal, police reopened the investigation and arrested 3 suspects, including the 61-year-old man, on the 21st of June. The other 2 suspects, 44-year-old man and 47-year-old woman, believed to be the boy's paternal grandparents, have been arrested on suspicion of conspiracy to commit grievous bodily harm. Police said all 3 suspects have been released pending further investigation. In the years since the circumcision, the mother said her son has suffered from recurring infections and his penis regularly becomes inflamed and sore. "It looks like it's been half circumcised," is the only way to describe it. "There's half the skin, it's not all the way over. It swells up, it gets red, and a little bit sore in places." She has been given cream to apply to her son and told he may need further surgery when he is older. Following media coverage about the case, an experienced urologist based in Cambridge has offered to assess the boy and see what can be done to help him. "When he first started talking, he did say a lot that it hurt," said the mother. "Now he doesn't really say much because it draws attention to it and is getting a bit more private." The boy's mother said the circumcision has affected her as well as her son. "As a new mom, I didn't know what it was doing with our baby anyway, but now I had that added worry on my mind," she said. "I was really upset about it. I didn't really get much better from there. It's just been ongoing, really." She said a lot of people have failed to empathize with her and her son. Even a couple of police officers have made remarks like, "Oh, my husband is circumcised. I think it's better." Or, "Oh, they are tougher than they look. It will toughen them up." It's just silly little comments like that. It's just heartbreaking. I wrote to MPs and they basically shoved me off. Everybody you speak to, it's like speaking to a brick wall. The mother said she is relieved that action is finally being taken and hopes the case will raise awareness. "I just can't believe that we've actually got to this point now and it's taken 4 years," said the mother. "Nobody was listening when I spoke about it and now it's being acknowledged worldwide. If anything good can come out of what's happened to my son, it's raising a little bit more awareness of the suffering that comes and giving people that are thinking of circumcising their children a bit of understanding about what they are doing."
Obviously, it's obviously it's really bad news for the little boy involved. But you know me, I'm a cynical. Politically speaking, this is fantastic news.
Yep.
It is. Because it pretty much shows what we've been hoping for. 3 years ago, we were talking about these kinds of things on the podcast, and it says here, "Oh, it's just nobody was listening when I spoke it, and now suddenly it's being acknowledged worldwide." Yeah, well, it's not really that sudden, and it's not really by chance that things are happening like that. It's been all the efforts of so many disparate people all over the world slowly knocking to those doors and said, "Look, you got to look into this. You got to look into this," day in and day out for years. Um, and at one moment the dam pretty much breaks and the water starts flowing in. It's pretty much like that. So it's not really all of a sudden. It's a result of a lot of efforts of a lot of people behind it. With that said, this is a very good opportunity to test in court the legal hypothesis that Mike Buchanan has been floating around for uh, at least 2 years now. Uh, for those who don't know, Mike Buchanan of the Justice for Men and Boys political party in the UK has been contending at least since 2015 that circumcision is illegal in the United Kingdom under the grievous Crimes Against Persons Act of 1860 something. We'll see how that works out in court, because presumably this lawyer will gonna argue something like that, and it's a good opportunity to test that in court.
Yeah, they'll probably, if that is held up as being illegal, they're probably going to do the same thing that happened in Germany. And I mean, that's just like pass legislation that explicitly makes it legal again.
Maybe that's the argument of Mike Buchanan, that namely it would have had to happen. It would have had to be an act of parliament to make it legal again, which didn't happen since 1865 and until present day. Though I think the climate in Britain is a little bit different than in Germany. It's not that clear cut, and of course the coalition government is a little bit more shaky, on more shaky grounds than the coalition ruling the country in Germany. Things that don't necessarily have to go the same way. And besides, forcing the MPs to explicitly vote for the genital mutilation of babies, that can in itself be an exercise that is worth having. It's worth hosting, because then you will know where you stand. Because for now we don't know where all the MPs are staying on this issue. Maybe there are more who agree with us than we dare to imagine right now.
Yeah, and of course in the UK the anti-Semitism argument is not as much of a trump card, of course, as it is in Germany.
Yeah.
So it might go the other way in the UK, but I actually wouldn't count on it. I think that
even if it doesn't, the exercise of forcing the MPs to vote on the issue would be worth in and of itself. Because then you can more easily campaign for or against other MPs, depending on how they voted on this issue. That's why I said, politically speaking, this is fantastic news. Now, of course, it's heartening to read the statements of the mother, and basically what she's been hitting upon is what we've been talking about on AVFM for 7 years now, 8 years. It's the gender empathy gap. No one really gives a shit, and she learned about it the hard way.
Yeah, as you said, even a dog has better protection.
Yeah, which is true. But it is very important to see these kinds of arguments floated on the BBC, no less, and floated probably soon enough in a court of law. These things this is going to be a very important case to follow, because it has the potential to get into a Supreme Court argument, and then probably in an argument in the House of Commons. Even if we lose when I say we, I mean our side that believes that genital mutilation is wrong. Even if we lose the practical politics battle today, it would still be a step forward, because at least we had the battle. Because up until very recently, even suggesting that there might be something wrong with mutilating baby boys' genitals was something that you wouldn't talk about it. I mean, the idea of having such a discussion in a court of law or in the House of Commons was thought as ludicrous. I mean, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So even having the debate, it's already a step forward, because until very recently we were all at the stage of the debate isn't happening. It's just no one cares.
Yeah.
So going from that to the stage of, well, we're actually going to have to debate this. Yeah, we don't like it, but we have to. That's already a step forward.
Yeah, and in terms of public opinion, I'm not sure about the figures from the UK, but from other countries I've looked at this, there tends to be a majority
Yeah.
against allowing circumcision of boys.
Mhm. Yeah,
Um,
in Scandinavia, they're the largest majorities against. With Denmark having something like 79 or 80% of the population believing not only that circumcision is wrong, but an outright ban on it and when making it a crime is the appropriate course of action. And either Denmark or Norway is going to be the first countries to actually do it, to actually have such a law on the books. But there are many others. In France, there was recently a discussion about that, and the surveys that the media have taken tilted a little bit against, something like 55 to 45. The public opinion is shifting. It's a long-term revolution. This business with genital mutilation. It's a battle for hearts and minds. It's going to take a while.
yeah, and I mean, you had the situation in Germany we talked about before, where in terms of like politics, it was just like an open and shut case that obviously has to be legalized. Obviously has to be legal. Anything else would just be horrible bigotry and would be anti-Semitic and anti-Muslim and so on. But in terms of public opinion, it was a lot more controversial and um, just just based on that, quite a few MPs might actually oppose it. And even if it's if say I don't know 30 or 40% of MPs um, vote in favor of banning circumcision or against legalizing it, that's already I think a win.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. That would in itself be a win. Even if it's 20%, it would still be a
Yep.
win, because the prospect of having even 2% 5 years ago was a fiction. Was science fiction per se. So yeah. Now I made the prediction that Denmark or Norway will probably be amongst the first ones to ban it. Germany will probably be among the last.
Probably.
Because it's gonna take a. I mean, yeah, the younger Germans today are far less susceptible to shutting up when you say Hitler to them. But it's gonna take at least another generation to finally cleanse the generations that are simply afraid of saying anything. Just because something might remotely be perceived as being anti-Semitic, and mind you, I'm a Zionist myself, and I'm very sensitive to anti-Semitism. But I'm sorry, mutilating baby boys' genitals is fucked up. And and if that offends anyone, Jewish or Muslim or whatever, I don't give a shit.
Yep.
No, that thou shalt keep thy barbarity to thyself. Do it when you're an adult. Fuck off. Right. Speaking of bizarre things, let's go to the next one. Daily Mail. Wombs for men. Astonishing prospect as fertility doctors back operations on NHS so transgender women born as boys can have babies. Transgender women who were born male should be given womb transplants so they can have children, leading NHS doctors have told the Mail on Sunday. And fertility experts say taxpayers should fund such transplants for those who identify as women on the basis of equality enshrined in law. Leading the debate on the controversial procedure is medical ethics lawyer Dr. Amel Al-Khani, who is pressing for talks on whether womb transplants for trans women should be publicly funded. Dr. Al-Khani of Liverpool University also predicts that a successful program would lead to others demanding wombs, including gay and straight men who wanted to experience the joys of carrying a child. This world is degenerate. But critics say the NHS should not waste precious resources merely to allow trans women to pursue an authentic female experience. Women's campaigner Laura Perrins said, quote, most taxpayers will not think this is a good use of resources. It raises profound ethical and moral issues that will have an impact on women's rights. It will impinge on the meaning of motherhood and womanhood. However, gynecologists are increasingly convinced that implanting a donor womb into a person born with male organs is possible, with one top doctor saying it is just a decade away. They believe the recent success in uterine transplantation in women born without wombs have drawn it a step closer. Since 2014, at least 5 babies have been born to wombless women after receiving donor wombs in a series of pioneering operations at Göteborg Universitet in Sweden. Later this year, British doctors hope to start their own charity-funded program to give donor wombs to at least 3 UK women. It is the remarkable success of the Swedish team that has triggered calls by transgender women for them to receive womb transplants too. And now some NHS doctors are backing their demands. Consultant gynecologist Dr. Ariana D'Angelo of the NHS's Wales Fertility Institute said it was right from an ethical point of view. We already have fertility preservation for transgender people to give them the possibility to have their own genetic child, she said. So I don't see much of a difference between that and actually delivering their own child. Dr. Francoise Shellfield, a clinical lecturer in obstetrics and gynecology at the University College London, who also treated infertile NHS patients for 30 years, added her support. If we are saying we should have equality and we have legislation defending the rights of transgender people, I don't see why not, she said. Their rights to equal treatment, she noted, were actually enshrined in legislation. The doctor's calls come as Hayden Cross, the first British female-to-male transsexual to become pregnant, is due to give birth. Mr. Cross, 21, from Gloucester, who was born a page, put his sex change on hold last year so he could have a baby, doing so with sperm from an online donor. Professor Stephen Wires of Ghent University Hospital in Belgium is starting a womb transplant program involving 20 women later this year. He said he believed transplants for trans women would happen in maybe a decade. Dr. Al-Khani, the director of Liverpool University's Health Law and Regulation Unit and a trained barrister, makes her case in the Journal of Law and the Biosciences, saying that once women started being offered womb transplants, questions will arise as to whether this should be publicly funded for trans women too. She said this would revolutionize reproduction. It could lead others to demand transplants, including straight men, allowing for couples to jointly share the reproductive burdens and joys of pregnancy. And she says, quote, homosexual couples may also wish to procreate in this fashion, while single men may opt for it to avoid surrogacy, close quote. So, there's, of course, the ethical and moral issue with it. And then there is with the procedures themselves, and then there's the issue on whether the taxpayers should foot the bill. I think the part with the taxpayers is easier to tackle. It's just no.
Yep, no, just no.
I mean, seriously, these kinds of procedures are immensely expensive, and just like any other socialist healthcare system, the NHS is having serious budgetary issues. So spending such a crap ton of money on an issue that doesn't affect too many people, that's one aspect. And secondly, it's immensely expensive. And thirdly, it's not a life-threatening issue. I mean, I'm sorry, but quote-unquote trans women are not going to die if they don't get to give birth through a transplanted uterus. I'm sorry, I just think they'll be just fine without it. It's not an issue.
And I mean,
even if you believe that the NHS is anything but cancer, even if you believe the NHS is a good thing, even if you believe in socialized healthcare, it's still a very, very strong leap of faith to believe that this is really necessary treatment rather than elective, what's it called? Basically something that's not really needed.
Yeah, elective surgery. It's trans women can already have children. They just can't become pregnant because they're not biologically women. They can.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I mean, they can produce sperm and have a child with presumably some sort of surrogate mother. And they can have children like that, and no problem. But trans women are not biologically women, and that's why they don't have wombs. I'm sorry, that's just biological reality, and you don't have a right to have a womb or something like that. That's just absurd.
Yeah, I've been looking through the the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the European Charter of Fundamental Freedoms, and I haven't seen anything there about the right to have a womb. So I find it very hard, even from a leftist perspective. I find it very hard to justify putting the taxpayers to pay the enormous amount of shekels needed to fund these kinds of interventions. Uh, Again, regardless of morality, let's presume that we agree 100% that this is perfectly ethical and there's nothing morally wrong with this. Even if we agree on all of that, it's still very hard to agree that the taxpayers should foot the bill.
Yeah, maybe as a fellow sufferer of womb withdrawal and the lack of having a womb, maybe I could agree to waive my rights of a womb for a payment of, I don't know, say like 100,000 euros, something like
No, that would
that,
be fine.
to cover
No,
it.
no, no. I could use that shekel about right now. Yeah, no. In all seriousness, the portion with forcing the taxpayers to foot the bill is probably the most, um, not only the most, the easiest to argue against, but also the most egregious of it. I mean, seriously. As for the ethics of it, I am really not convinced of the ethics and the morality of it. I mean, and I'll we'll go a little bit further on this when we get to the artificial insemination case that which comes from France. But um, really, there's just already enough people with wombs already on the planet, so it's not like there is a shortage of that, and we really, really have to do something about it. I'm not convinced of the necessity of this. I don't regard this. I regard this as a pursuit that. Of course, it shouldn't necessarily be illegal, but I wouldn't mind if it would be shunned and definitely kept away from public funding.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree that it shouldn't be pursued with public funds, but as far as the ethicality of someone doing that with his own money or her own money, um, I don't really have a problem with that.
Yeah, I do on a moral sense. Again, I don't think it should be illegal. In fact, it would be very complicated to even enforce such a law. So I don't think it should be illegal. But I really don't think it is. It is morally okay or even something to be praised. Oh my God, you discovered a way to put wombs into men. Yeah, congratulations. Get into the helicopter. I mean, come on, get real. Uh, I just don't think it is an appropriate use of resources. Now, of course, if it's their shekels, I guess I don't have a say in it, but I still do get an opinion, and the opinion is that this is degenerate.
All right.
Right. Let's keep further on the tranny agenda because there's quite a lot of these things. Coming from the Independent, a newspaper that still insists that it's not a left-wing rag. Private Jewish school fails a third Ofsted inspection for not teaching LGBT issues. A private faith school in London has failed its third Ofsted inspection for refusing to teach its pupils about homosexuality. Inspectors visiting Vishnitz Girls' School in North London last month said the Orthodox school does not give pupils a full understanding of fundamental British values, the Telegraph reported. Pupils were not taught about LGBT issues such as sexual orientation, which are in breach of equality laws. This restricts pupils' spiritual, moral, social, and cultural development and does not promote equality of opportunity in ways that take account of different lifestyles, inspectors reported. The school's approach resulted in pupils being, quote, shielded from learning about certain differences between people, such as sexual orientation, the report went on. The school's culture is, however, clearly focused on teaching pupils to respect everybody regardless of beliefs and lifestyle, close quote. While school leaders recognize the requirement to teach about the protected characteristics as set out in the Equality Act of 2010, they acknowledge that they do not teach pupils about all the protected characteristics, particularly those related to gender reassignment and sexual orientation. This means that pupils have a limited understanding of the different lifestyles and partnerships that individual may choose to in present-day society. While fee-paying schools such as Vishnitz do not operate under the same curriculum as mainstream state schools, they are obliged to meet two separate sets of standards for sex and relationships education laid out by the Department for Education and Ofsted. The school, which has 212 pupils and charges annual fees of £5,200, was praised in other areas, including the fact that teachers had good subject knowledge and high quality classroom resources. Private schools, which do not meet Ofsted requirements, which include consideration for spiritual, moral, social, and cultural development of pupils, must improve or face closure. Gil Robbins from the Christians in Education campaign group criticized the decision, writing in a blog post, quote, "It has now been made crystal clear by Ofsted that the Equality Act is actually hierarchical, with sexual orientation and gender reassignment at the apex of the act. All equalities are equal, but some equalities are more equal than others. Ofsted has revealed its true agenda. It doesn't matter how good your school is in all other respects. Simply refusing to teach very young children about gender reassignment will lead to your closure," close quote. Earlier this year, Education Secretary Justine Greening pushed through plans to make sex and relationships education compulsory in all schools. LGBT campaigners warned that the policy still left loopholes for religious schools in that they are allowed some flexibility in their teaching of SRE in keeping with their faith. A spokesperson from the LGBT charity Stonewall said, quote, "It's vital all young people learn about LGBT issues. Inclusive, age-appropriate education ensures young people understand and celebrate difference. For those who might be questioning their gender identity, it's essential as it shows they're not alone and that what they're feeling isn't wrong. We applaud schools that create an inclusive learning environment where all students of all backgrounds and identities feel welcome, safe, and understood." Vishnitz School has been contacted for a response. The faith school is one of the 7 known to have failed Ofsted inspections within recent weeks. And the article goes a bit more on, but we get the gist. Now, question: why is it so important for 3 to 8-year-old girls, to Jewish girls, to know about sex change surgeries?
I guess you caught me on the wrong foot with that question. Not quite sure. I think I'm gonna have to Google that.
And, I know this sounds, and probably the few people who are slightly towards the left that might be listening to us, most people in that category tend to perceive this as bigotry, and I really don't care if they perceive it as bigotry, but I'm serious when I'm asking, why can't a school, especially a private one that doesn't demand anything from the commons, from the taxpayer, why can't a school exist that does not teach very young children about these things? Why aren't they allowed to exist? What is really the harm in having a school where 5-year-olds are ignorant about sex change surgeries? What's so wrong about that?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, all these standards for schools, they really are about propaganda. They're about teaching a certain sets of ideological propositions to everyone. And I mean, it's of course much worse in the public schools, where the state regulates everything that is being taught. But even private schools are under the thumb here, and I think I think it's just very dangerous to have this sort of one size fits all approach to education. Because the thing is, if you have a few private schools that teach their pupils differently, then you do get more of a diversity of opinion on these topics. And if everyone in a particular society is taught one particular approach to a topic, that is very problematic, because then it's much harder to notice mistakes and shortcomings in that view.
Yeah.
Whereas if you have a society where different people are taught different things in school, then you get more of an exchange of ideas, because there are more different ideas out there, and it's then easier to correct mistakes and to notice shortcomings of particular views.
Yeah. And this is the and this article once again puts emphasizes why I absolutely despise the so-called LGBT campaigners, or as I like to call them, the adherents of the LGBTist religion, which is an entirely different group than non-straight people. Most non-straight people are not LGBTists, and most LGBTists are not non-straight themselves. So anyway, here it says the LGBT campaigns warned that this law, as applied by Ofsted right now, it's still not good enough because it leaves loopholes for religious schools. I mean, that is to say, some people are still allowed to think independently of their ideological approach.
They allowed some flexibility. Oh my God.
And look,
Someone think of the children.
yeah,
Some flexibility.
that can't be accepted. And look, I'm not a big fan of Jewish schools. I mean, probably if I were to get into that Jewish schools, I would be very very pissed off about a lot of things. I'm not a big fan of religious schools in general. But nevertheless, especially if they don't draw anything from the public purse, they don't ask anything from the taxpayers. They just want to be left alone. I'm for leaving them alone. So what if they don't teach? And again, it's not even a serious quote unquote infraction. Oh my God, they don't teach 5-year-olds about sex reassignment surgery. I think we can live with that. I mean, we developed this entire society over the last several hundreds of years without teaching our 5-year-olds about sex reassignment surgery, and we've been fine. So I fail to see how it is such a serious issue that one tiny schools of just 200 pupils in North London exists that doesn't teach pupils about sex reassignment surgery. I really don't see what the harm is.
Yeah, and I mean, there are plenty of other sources of information for these children apart from school.
Yeah, of
School
course.
doesn't necessarily need to teach people about everything because it's impossible. There's so much knowledge out there in the world that you obviously have to be very, very selective. And this particular school has decided to select things slightly differently. Why is that somehow a huge problem? I could certainly find you lots of more or less important things, or things that are at least as important as knowing about sex reassignment surgeries that various public schools don't teach.
Yeah.
Certainly, I can find plenty of examples of that, but
It wouldn't be hard.
you just have to be selective because there's so much things out there that you could possibly know and that might possibly be useful to know.
Yeah. And again, this isn't the 1700s. The entirety of the body of knowledge has grown, not even exponentially, but rather logarithmically. Uh,
Logarithmically is a lot slower than exponentially.
yeah, but what's the call? The one that suddenly grows much faster than it is logarithmic actually.
Logarithm is actually very slow growth.
Ah, okay. The one that suddenly starts growing very very fast after a long.
Exponential?
Yeah, I think it is exponential. Yeah, you're right. Anyway, the whole body of knowledge is much bigger now than it was even 50 years ago, let alone 300 years ago. So yeah, selection is going to have to be made, uh, and to go as far as they face closure if they don't comply. That pretty much gives a lot of credence to the actual radicals out there who say that, oh look, everything is under persecution and whatnot. Well, this pretty much does look like that, doesn't it? I mean, it pretty much does look that the LGBTs are the new religious right, basically.
Yeah, basically. I mean, there's certainly still efforts by the religious right. I mean, not so much in Britain because they're just not as influential.
They
But like,
don't
if you look
they don't
at
have a right to begin with, let alone a religious right.
yeah. I mean, if you look at the United States, for example, there's still a lot of pressure from the religious right to um, say teach creationism in public
Yeah,
schools and things like that. So there's definitely this kind of pressure going on from the religious rights in America, but in Britain, not really.
and the thing is that at least in the United States, and this is something that we in Europe are utterly failing. I don't remember the word. I have to look for it. In the United States, they have this valve uh, where of a very strong private sector, really private sector education. I mean, seriously, you have schools about anything. Private schools in the United States, from hardline religious to hardline secular to Marxist schools, anything you can imagine, there is a private school that can fit your needs. So there is always this valve. So both the pressures from the religious left and the pressures for the religious right uh, are still very much diminished by the fact that you can always tell to the radicals, look, if you don't like it, there's a school on your tastes right across the road, get the fuck out. Um,
Yeah, and
but you don't.
if
Sorry,
worse
go
comes
ahead.
to worse, you can still homeschool your children in the United
Yeah,
States, which is
yeah.
illegal in a lot of European countries.
Yeah, yeah. So at least they have this valve in the United States. We don't have that in Europe for the most part. And yeah, homeschooling is illegal in what, in Germany, in Sweden, in the United Kingdom, Ireland, and there are a few others. Yeah, where homeschooling is entirely illegal. Yeah, that's horrible, horrible. And of course, in many others where it's technically legal, it's still very hard to come by because you need a lot of permissions and whatnot from the state, and you have to present a very good reason and complicated. De facto, it's illegal in most of Europe. Yeah. Okay, let's go to the next one. We're moving pretty decently. Le Figaro. The Ethical Committee rules in favor of medically assisted procreation for all women. The National Advisory Committee on Ethics, the CCNE, made a very long awaited announcement this morning. It is relevant because Emmanuel Macron said he would wait for this report before he would open the debate on the issue of medically assisted procreation, or PMA. Awaited for more than 4 years, the opinion of the CCNE on PMA was made public on Tuesday. Over the years, this advisory board has assumed a high political importance. Indeed, during the debate regarding allowing all women to have access to medically assisted procreation, or PMA, at the time of the Marriage for All Act, this body was invoked by François Hollande to postpone the subject. The president of the body, Jean-François Delfrécy, had warned, quote, "This opinion will certainly not be unanimous and will trigger animosities on both sides," close quote. According to the latest figures of the Agency of Biomedicine, 1,346 children were born following a donation of gametes in France in 2014, of which 1,107 thanks to a donation of spermatozoa. The waiting lists for couples for a donation of gametes are long and sometimes stretching for several years. In recent years, thousands of unmarried women and lesbian couples have traveled abroad to have a baby in countries where PMA is permitted regardless of marital status and sexual orientation, such as Spain. In 2014, in the wake of the Marriage for All Act, the Court of Cassation validated the possibility of the adoption by the spouses, including in same-sex couples, of a child conceived by artificial insemination, even if the child is born abroad. La Manif pour Tout fears that this opening in France leads to the advent of an encouragement of fatherless making of children. The LGBT community, on the other hand, claims it is a measure of equality. The Ethics Committee is in favor of opening the PMA to women and unmarried, to lesbian women and unmarried women. So far, it is only allowed for infertile heterosexual couples. And then the article goes very, very long, and it's the story on how François Hollande wasn't progressive enough, and also a lot of bitching and complaining by the LGBTs that the proposal is not good enough because they're never happy. So yeah, but that's basically the gist. Until basically a few days ago, the absolute opinion was that, look, we cannot, artificial insemination shouldn't be banned, but we should try it as much as possible when we allow it to be in a situation where we can at least be a little bit concerned about the fact of whether that child is going to be brought up in a uh, intact family or not. And now all of this, according to the ethics committee, can be turned on its head because, well, because nobody can stay in the way of non-straight equality. You see. And the thing is that, and I should probably say, La Manif pour Tout is the coalition of various NGOs, some of them secular, some of them religious, that oppose the LGBTist march through institutions in France. Um, so yeah, that's basically the news. Now, as far as I'm concerned, La Manif pour Tout has a point. I mean, at the end of the day, when you conceive a child as a single woman, that's essentially through these kinds of measures. That's essentially using, and mind you, in France, these kinds of things are paid for by the taxpayers. That's essentially you using the taxpayers to conceive a child that will fundamentally be sentenced to fatherlessness right from the get-go. And I can really understand the concern by the by Lamanif Porto and others to say, hold on a second, why should we be paying for that? Why should we be even allowing that to begin with? Because it's definitely not healthy. I mean, yeah, sure, the LGBTs are like, oh, there is no difference. Of course, there is a difference. Fatherless children end up poor. There is a difference.
Yeah, and it's just very simple maths. Two parents are better than one. How is that so hard to understand?
And it's
And
not
I
just
mean,
that. Go ahead, please.
of course, it's not just about the number of parents. Obviously, like one really good parent is better than two abusive parents. But in general, two parents are going to be better than one. Um, so if you have if you have a child as a single mother, um, the chances of that child having adverse life outcomes are just so much higher. There's uh, plenty and plenty of sociological evidence on that. There's been so many studies done on that. Um, children in single mother homes have much worse life outcomes across many different dimensions than children who grow up in intact families. Now, as far as lesbian couples having children, I'm actually fine with that. As far as I know, the evidence on that is that the life outcomes are actually even slightly better, which is probably mostly due to selection effects, but who knows? Um, so if you have two parents of the same sex, that seems to be also just fine. But just one parent alone, one mother alone in particular, um, it's just not a good idea. I mean, I understand that in some situations you end up as a single mother or a single parent through no fault of your own. If you like if your partner leaves you or if your partner dies or whatever, that can happen. But it's not something that you should like plan at the outset to just not have the partner there in the first place. That's just I mean,
Which
certainly,
absolutely is the case in these situations.
yeah, and certainly there are some very good single mothers. I'm not saying that there aren't, but just on average, you're going to have a much worse outcome if you have a single mother than if you have two parents.
Yeah, and the prospect of the state, the taxpayers paying for you to have fatherless children just because you can and just because you quote unquote have the right, because some idiots in the ethics committee, no less, decided that that's just honky dory. I mean, that's just horrifying. I mean, I don't think you need to be religious to find this development horrifying.
Yeah,
Right. As for the lesbian parents, I don't know. I've seen conflicting evidence, and as far as I'm aware, no such study was made on France. So I'm gonna suspend judgment on that. I just don't know. Uh, and don't know is probably the most correct answer at this point. Nevertheless, even with lesbians, I would go on the same logic. Why should the state pay for it? Besides, as this article already says, those who really wanted it already just took the train across the mountains to Spain and solved the issue there. So uh, why the rush? Why the rush in changing so many laws when you still don't know a lot of these things, and how are they going to play out? And when you do know, you make just a wrong judgment in the case of single mothers.
yeah, and
It's
having
just
such a
just
hurdle
too
in
easy.
place is actually a good thing because it means that only those like single women will get children who like really want it, and these are presumably going to be selected for or a selected group that is presumably will presumably be better parents who are
At the
with
very
this
least, are more
very strong
economically.
wish to be a parent and will presumably do a better job than just randomly selected single woman.
Yeah, yeah, at the very least, it's the economic barrier. I mean, as someone that can afford to travel from the northeast of France to the southwest of Spain to get such a procedure is probably an individual that can afford to have a child a lot more than some random broad on the street. Just saying.
Yeah, I mean, money is first of all important because, well, having a child costs money, and if you have
Yeah.
more money, you can give your child all sorts of opportunities. And also, people who have more money also tend to be more educated, tend to be more intelligent, tend to be, for these reasons, better parents. So you're just going to get, in general, better outcomes.
Hmm. Hmm. Right. Okay. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But it's really, really annoying to see these kinds of things out there. So now suddenly Hollande, who was by far the most far left president that France ever had, is suddenly now not progressive enough. And oh my God, how dared he to postpone the debate until some ethics inquiry occurred? And it's just disgusting, completely disgusting. Right. Let's go to the next one.
Okay, next one is from Germany, from the Zeit, and as a bit of background information to that article, um, last week on Friday, the Bundestag in Germany voted to legalize gay marriage in Germany. Um, and so that's something that is sort of picked up here in that article. Okay, so here goes. In the history of advancing liberalization, same-sex marriage does come as a surprise to anyone, but the haste in which things have now played out is indeed surprising. Fairness demands that same-sex couples can live in the same way as traditional unions of man and woman, from hospital to inheritance. Of course, this also goes for a part of life that is central to most people: parenthood. Why shouldn't two women or two men be allowed to adopt a child after a case-by-case review? The criteria are certainly strict enough. Not only is the suddenness surprising, but it is also strange um, that we are taking the second step before the first. Equality for homosexuals is achieved before equality between mother and father. Many people believe that a biological father automatically has custody of his child, but that's completely wrong. Biological fatherhood means basically nothing. In fact, you become a father only through marriage or through the mother's consent in some other form. There's a famous ruling of the Bundesverfassungsgericht, the Supreme Court, from a few years ago, where a man was denied the right to a paternity test after the birth of his child when his life partner, who at the time was still married to another man, moved back to her husband and their two older children, and of course took the infant with her. The law is always on the side of the husband. This principle is tenaciously adhered to. Especially leftists and liberals who regard men with suspicion do not want to make any concessions to them. Thus, a law remains unfinished, which the Bundesverfassungsgericht had demanded in 2015. After an apparent father, i.e., a man who was mistakenly believed to be a father, found out, or mistakenly believed himself to be the father, found out the truth, it didn't give him the right to demand to know the name of the biological father for the purposes of demanding back payment on child support, because according to the law back then, protecting the mother's intimacy was more important. As you may remember, we covered that case back when it happened on the show. It took Justice Minister Heiko Maas 1.5 years. Oh, sorry, actually, I'm talking nonsense. I'm talking about. Sorry, forget that last comment. Um, it took Justice Minister Heiko Maas 1.5 years to get a legislative proposal through the cabinet, according to which there would be an obligation for the mother to disclose the information, but not a right to back payments for the time during which the apparent father didn't question his paternity. During that time, the argument goes, um, he did, after all, enjoy family life. Um, and yeah, this is the law that we did cover. Yeah. So the Greens were also against the mother's obligation to disclose. Suddenly, the proposal wasn't quite. Suddenly, the personal wasn't quite so political, but rather very intimate. The children might sooner or later want to learn who their fathers are. Who cares? Another destructive idea came from Sigmar Gabriels of the SPD, and to suspend the driver's licenses of deadbeat dads, if that would lead to more as if that would lead to more child support being paid. There are statistics from the US which show a very close relationship between willingness to pay and the frequency with which dads get to see their kids. Such numbers are lacking for Germany. This law on apparent fatherhood was hailed as being without any alternative, but hasn't even made it to the Bundestag yet. Back in the day, traditional marriage served to soothe the eternal male uncertainty about paternity. we need not shed any tears for it. But that we still don't have any concept for fatherhood without marriage is an oversight whose severity can hardly be overstated. More and more boys grow up completely without men. They live with a single mother, encounter female teachers in kindergarten and school. Masculinity seems very distant to them, something that can only be achieved through great effort. This leads to what is today frequently erroneously called toxic masculinity. The concept of modern paternity in the age of DNA is actually ridiculously simple. It's about biology. Do I really need to remind people what a strong bond that is? Same-sex marriage is well intended, but runs the danger of further undermining true fatherhood. Gay male couples are certain to experience the same lack of success after years of petitioning the adoption agency, which is already routine to biological fathers. That gays like to appeal to Jesus having had two fathers shows that they have not yet properly taken account of the problem of biological fatherhood and the political debate surrounding it. In the meanwhile, maybe some playwright writes a play about a man who is denied a paternity test while his son is put up for adoption by the mother and who ends up living with two nice ladies. The perfect setup for some good old pathological hypermasculinity. But who knows, maybe someday the insight will spread that heteronormativity, as the name suggests, is also an illiberal attack on straight people, which cements the outdated division of labor between men and women. Then the suffering of milkmen's children, stepchildren, and the children who have no father or false father can finally be mitigated. In terms of numbers, they are on par with homosexuals, but they do not have the lobbyists.
Fantastic article. Yeah, nothing really to add. Except, and yeah, he basically concluded correctly. They don't have the lobbyists. As for why this homo nonsense advanced much further than pretty much anything else, especially the really needed ones in the realm of sexual politics for normal people, it's fairly simple. When you have an entire government and a huge supermajority in the parliament of cultural Marxists, it's the perceived minorities that actually matter. Normal people, fuck them. It's really that simple. But I guess he can't write that because that would be hate speech or something. We'll soon talk about that too. As I don't have anything else to add, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, some things that I would I would take some issue with, like the idea that traditional marriage is something that is glad you got rid of. I'm not so sure about that.
True, except that it's not really gotten rid of. I remember doing some research on when a friend of mine wrote, and with input from me, the article about privatizing marriage. It's up on AVFM. And I looked specifically into Germany, with how many people, married people, are today compared to the fall of the Berlin Wall and whatnot, and it kept on dropping after 1990. Yes, it did. But on the other hand, the number of people, as a proportion of the population, living together as a de facto family has been constantly similar. It has stayed roughly the same over the last 30 years. So while you have the uh, in Romania, we have this term, married with receipt or without receipt. Namely, that if you've involved the government in a disgusting menage a trois in your bedroom or not. That's really the only difference. I mean, the actual traditional family is very fine and dandy, even in Germany and pretty much everywhere else. I mean, just people just don't go to the city hall anymore to get a marriage certificate or a license, as the English language would call it. But other than that, things haven't really changed that much. They may have changed in appearance, but in substance, not really.
Well, I'm not so sure about that because you do see a lot more single motherhood. Do see a lot more of what we even in German call patchwork families of where I know there's like a divorced woman who gets together with a divorced man, and each brings their separate children into the marriage, and that sort of thing. That's certainly something that you didn't see much of in the past, or at least
Yeah.
it was a lot less common, and it's much more common now.
Mhm.
And these sort of whether it's real marriages or sort of quasi-marital arrangements, they're a lot less stable now than they used to be.
That's true.
Um,
With the stability part, that's true. Yeah.
and it's not as bad in Germany as it is, for example, in the United States, where what is something like 40% of all children are born out of wedlock. We don't
Yeah.
have any sort of numbers like that in Germany, but it still has risen quite a bit over the last couple of decades.
Mhm.
Um, so these traditional institutions, they are on the decline. I don't think it's a good thing. Um, but yeah, they're still the norm right now.
Yeah. Whereas this guy speaks about them in the past tense. Oh, there's not no shed, no tear to be shed. Maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe you're getting a little bit ahead of yourself. But I presume he does it on on a hyperbole point, so that he can then go on um, and satirize the liberal and leftist position with using all their buzzwords backwardly, which I thought it was really nice. I mean, very good writing.
Yep.
Right. Staying in the area of rights for parents, going into the mental asylum, that would be Scandinavia. Coming from the NRK, fresh legal thinking may deter child abduction. The woman and the father of the child agreed to a court settlement to have joint parental responsibility and care for their minor daughter. Half a year later, the mother moved her daughter from Rogaland County to the United Kingdom. Over the phone, she informed her former cohabitant that they had left and that he would never see her daughter again. It is stated in the new verdict of the Supreme Court. In the district court, the woman was sentenced to 6 months imprisonment for taking away the child from the father's care. The verdict was appealed to the Court of Appeal, which lowered the imprisonment sentence to 4 months because the case took a long time. The woman then appealed the punishment, and now the Supreme Court has maintained the verdict of the Court of Appeal, and the woman has been sentenced to imprisonment for 4 months. In the verdict, the Supreme Court emphasizes that the abduction lasted for more than 4 months and that the mother did not return voluntarily with the child. It was the father who had fought to get the daughter home with the help of the police and a local court. The Supreme Court opines that the sentence should be increased to 6 months in prison, but kept it at 4 because the prosecution had not suggested that the sentence should be sharpened. The sentence is a crystal clear sign to anyone who plans to take children out of Norway illegally. If you do that, you will end up in prison, says lawyer Sheikh R. Hoheim to NRK. He is one of the 24 lawyers of the Ministry of Justice and Emergency Affairs list of specialists in children's rights cases. Should you interpret the Supreme Court, they mean that the normal penal level should be 6 months unconditional imprisonment, a pretty significant penalty by Norway standards. By 2016, 59 children were registered as being abducted from Norway and taken abroad, and 26 children were abducted from somewhere else and brought to Norway. Hoheim believes this sentence may be a deterrent to parents who consider taking their children illegally out from Norway. The judgment is important for the children first and foremost. It is also relevant because it has become easier to travel than ever before, and that many people are affiliated with other countries, says Hoheim. The Association Two Parents tell NRK that they are usually skeptical of the claims made by parents who say they had no choice but to take away the child because they think it is positive for the child to have contact with both parents if there is no violence in the picture. That said, quote, this judgment from several judicial authorities is an important signal. It is not advisable to take away the child from one's parents' care, nor to put a court order or judgment, close quote, says Jeanette Solheim. Consideration of children's rights must be set first. Basically, this is the first time when a superior body, this time the Supreme Court, affirms that, yeah, you know that thing that we used to practice, the pussy pass for mothers who abduct their children, yeah, that's pretty much over now. Thank you.
Bravo. That's all I have to say. That's something
Yeah,
that needs to happen for a long time, and
long overdue, yeah.
yep, I applaud the Norwegian courts.
Yeah, the Supreme Court of Norway has been producing a lot of these kinds of very fantastic news in in the last 18 months. I'm almost willing to ask her to ask them, "Are you okay? Blink twice if you've been captured by a coalition of Trumpian MRAs or something." But nevertheless, keep up the good work. Yeah, just it should be common sense, and it shows you how deeply misandric the practices have been in many of these social services institutions in Scandinavia. Because it took the Supreme Court to say, "Hold on a second, no, you just can't really just kidnap the kid. I mean, really, you just can't. You just shouldn't be doing that." And it took it took a case to go all the way up to the Supreme Court to get this overturned. Now, admittedly, this case is even more shocking. I mean, to us outside of Norway, is like, yeah, that kind of makes sense. I mean, yeah, sure, of course. But it's even more shocking if you're inside Norway, or at least you're very familiar with their system. I mean, these kinds of kidnappings have been assisted by their private public corporation called Barne Vernet, which is many people think it's just basically the child protection services of like any other country, except it's not. It's mostly a private corporation that makes money by dealing with by being a dealer of children. Basically, it's a very very nasty body that probably sooner rather than later will be dismantled. But until then, one by one, its powers are being stripped away in these very very slow cases and these very very slow legal revolutions that are rarely reported.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go to the next one.
Okay, the next one is from the BBC once again, but this time about Germany. Germany votes for 50 million euro social media fines. From October, Facebook, YouTube, and other sites with more than 2 million users in Germany must take down posts containing hate speech or other criminal material within 24 hours. Content that is not obviously unlawful must be assessed within 7 days. The new law is one of the toughest of its kind in the world. Failure to comply will result in a 5 million euro penalty, which could rise to 50 million euros depending on the severity of the offense. In a statement, Facebook said it shared the goal of the German government to fight hate speech. It added, "We believe the best solution will be found when government, civil society, and industry work together, and that this law, as it stands now, will not improve efforts to tackle this important societal problem." German MPs voted in favor of the Netzwerkdurchsetzungsgesetz, wonderful German word, or the NetzDG law, after months of deliberation on the last legislative day before the Bundestag's summer break. But it has already been condemned by human rights groups and industry representatives. They claim that tight time limits are unrealistic and will lead to accidental censorship, as technology companies err on the side of caution and delete ambiguous posts to avoid paying penalties. The law will not come into force until after the German federal elections, which will be held in September. Justice Minister Heiko Maas singled out Facebook, which has some 30 million users in Germany, saying experience had shown that without political pressure, the large platform operators would not fulfill their obligations to take down illegal content. He added that the law, quote, "does not solve all problems. It tackles the issue of hate crimes on social media, which are increasingly a problem in many countries." Mr. Maas, who oversaw the legislation, told the German parliament that online hate crimes had increased by almost 300% in the past few years, adding that no one should be above the law. The bill was drafted after several high-profile incidents of fake news and criminal hate speech being spread on social media sites in Germany. One case involved the targeting of prominent Green MP Renate Künast with a post that falsely suggested she was sympathetic to a refugee who had murdered a German student in the southern city of Freiburg. For its part, Facebook said it had already made substantial progress in removing illegal content and called into question the efficacy of the law. The company recently announced that it hired an extra 3,000 staff on top of the 4,500 it already has to help monitor the millions of reports that come through every week. Social media companies also point to a recent report by the European Commission, which showed that some 80% of all reported illegal content is already removed in Germany. In addition to social media sites themselves, 3 voluntary independent bodies currently monitor the German internet. The BBC was given access to one of them, run by ECO, the German Association of the Internet Industry, in Cologne. In a small, heavily secured office, 3 legal experts sifted through thousands of complaints from members of the public. One example shown to the BBC was of a YouTube video titled Sieg Heil, a phrase that can be illegal in Germany. The video was reported to the local police in North Rhine-Westphalia and followed up with the social network itself after a few days. But the organizers of the facility, which has been in existence for 15 years, are also concerned about the NetzDG, which they say has been rushed through for political expediency. It takes time to define if a complaint's content is actually illegal or not, said Alexander Rabe, a member of the ECO board, which was consulted by the government on the draft law. Mr. Rabe also pointed out that much of what many might deem to be fake news or hate speech on their social media feeds was not in fact illegal content under current German law. The bill has also faced criticism from human rights campaigners. Many of the violations covered by the bill are highly dependent on context which the platforms are in no position to assess, wrote the UN Special Rapporteur to the High Commissioner for Human Rights, David Kay. He added that, quote, the obligations placed on private companies to regulate and take down content raises concerns with respect to freedom of expression. The law could still be stopped in Brussels, where campaigners have claimed it breaches EU laws.
Yeah, the law won't be stopped on Brussels. The fucktards in Brussels are even more radical than the Bundestag, so don't get your hopes too high. Unless it gets challenged in the ECJ, the European Court of Justice, there it might have a chance, but it's going to be a very, very long fight, and I don't know anyone who has the money to put into that particular legal fight. With that said, maybe it's time for Google to extend. Google for now has a ban on Google Maps for Germany and Austria because the German and Austrian laws are so retarded that Google said, "Fuck it, we're not." You guys just don't get Google Maps. Fuck off. Maybe it's time to extend that ban on all products Google, which means you're gonna have to learn to use a VPN, Jon, so we can still make this show.
Way of getting that Google Maps is banned in Germany.
Well, it doesn't cover almost anything. Has that been changed? I mean, last time I checked, it was last year, and Google Maps wasn't covering almost anything in Germany, precisely because of privacy laws and things like that. Sorry, I think it was only Street
Maybe
View.
you mean Google Street View.
Street View, yeah.
Yeah, that's
to me they're the same thing, but yeah, you're right, Street View. Maybe such thing could be extended to YouTube and some other where you might get some quote unquote illegal content. Because really, I mean, I could see one of my own videos on my own channel being taken down because they breached some speech law in Germany, but they're perfectly legal in the United States, or in Romania, so where I live, where the company lives, it's all fine and dandy. But because some German might see it, therefore it has to be taken down. I think that's retarded.
Yeah. And
Amazing.
I mean, why does the German government have or believe it has any sort of right to regulate what an American company can put up on their own servers in America? I mean, that just seems to me stupid to me, but yeah.
Yeah, but then again, as you always say on this show, Germany doesn't even have free speech to begin with. So,
I mean, yeah, sort of, kind of. It's limited free speech as you have in most countries, really.
Yeah. I don't know. At least here there is a constitutional amendment that says censorship of any kind is forbidden. So
you have that in German constitution also, that there's.
Yeah, but at least here they respect it for now, or have been respecting it. Maybe I should say.
Yeah, it's basically like free speech with an asterisk. That, except for, you can't deny the Holocaust, and you can't do this and this and that and the other. But mostly you have free speech, and yeah.
Yeah, but still, I don't understand why And I'm sorry, but I'm not buying any of that. Oh, the online hate crimes have been increasing by almost 300% in the past few years. First of all, what's an online hate crime? Uh, if I call Thomas de Mazière a nigger, is that an online hate crime? Because I believe he's a nigger. Maybe I don't, but for the purposes of this show, I believe. Um, is that an online hate crime? And if it is, what is a 300% increase from 4 cases to 15, or yeah, 15, or an increase, I don't know, from 2,000 cases to what's 300%? 8,000? I don't know. Maybe.
And you also have to take into account that the number of people using social media has increased a lot over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Just the pure volume of posts, so 300% increase. I don't know over how many years they're talking about. It isn't too surprising.
Also, does this law apply to anything that can be seen from Germany, or is it content that is produced from Germany? Because if it's content that is produced from Germany, maybe I could sort of understand it, because you'll go after the one who actually made the content or whatnot, or if it's a German citizen. But if I write something in German from Romania and post it on an American website, yeah, sure, it can be seen from Germany, but it has nothing to do with Germany. Why should anyone be punished for something that doesn't concern Germany as the German government to begin with?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure exactly how that works. But yeah,
Amazing.
that's certainly something we should look into.
Amazing. Right. Let's go. Oh my God, 3 more, I think. And 15 minutes. Let's see if we can do it. Going again to Scandinavia. Coming from the BBC, Swedish Music Festival is cancelled in 2018 after rape and sexual assault claims. Sweden's biggest music festival is being cancelled in 2018 after one rape and multiple reports of sexual assault at this year's event. Bråvalla was headlined by System of Shutdown, Linkin Park, Alesso, and The Killers at the weekend. But police in the Swedish town of Norrköping said they received 11 reports of sexual assault this year. Officers say the rape victim was attacked while Swedish group Håkan Hellström performed on Friday night. Organizers have released a statement announcing that next year's event won't be taking place. There were also numerous sexual abuse claims made during and after the last year's festival, with 5 reports of rape made to police. Mumford and Sons said they wanted guarantees about women's safety following their headline slot in 2016. We won't play at this festival again until we've had assurances from the police and organizers that they're doing something to combat what appears to be a disgustingly high rate of reported sexual violence. The German company, which organizes Bråvalla, FKP Scorpio, said it was a shame that some men couldn't behave properly and didn't think it was safe to put on another event. Words cannot describe how incredibly sad we are about this, and we most seriously regret and condemn this, said a press release on the festival's website. This is not okay. We do not accept this at our festival. Therefore, we have decided not to organize Bråvalla 2018. Swedish Prime Minister Stefan Löfven described last year's attacks on women as totally unacceptable and said laws on sexual assault would be tightened in the country. Close quote. And the article goes a bit longer to introduce UK for some reason into this story. The short answer is yeah, not really. I was in Norrköping just a bit before the festival took place just this year, and as far as I've learned from the locals, there's a lot of exaggeration behind this, and it's probably has something to do with the fact that the festival wasn't really that popular anymore. With that said, of course, that doesn't mean necessarily that all the cases reported are bollocks, but probably some of them are. What's really a lot more annoying for the casual observer is the fact that they're consistently, and as we'll see in the next article as well, they consistently avoid speaking um, about the actual issue. And the actual issue is not that suddenly Swedes have become more rapey. It's the issue that Norrköping and many other smaller and bigger cities in Sweden have become increasingly culturally enriched and diverse. And it's the diversity that is slightly more rapey than the Swedish population. It's really that simple. But no, but you'll never hear this because it's hate speech. What you hear is that, oh my God, some men can't behave properly. All right, but what kind of men? Is it your average Jan from the neighborhood who has been living there for the last 40 years? Because it doesn't really look like that.
Yeah. What I also find sad about incidents like this is that you always hear this, laws must be tightened. Well, why? I mean, sexual assault and rape are already illegal in Sweden. Why does an event where these crimes are committed mean that laws have to be tightened? Doesn't follow at all.
Yeah, it doesn't. And again, even if the laws were tighter or more harsher or whatnot, I mean, it was a failure to even begin to enforce the law here. So it's not like it would have helped the presumed victims if the law had been tighter. It wouldn't have helped them at all because the law could not be enforced at the moment.
Yep.
Anyway, staying around this topic of festivals in Sweden, and this one provides even a bit more context coming from the local. Swedish comedian organizes man-free rock festival in response to rape reports, and this is why I hate Sweden. A Swedish comedian is organizing a man-free rock festival in response to the reported rapes and sexual assaults at music festivals in the country in recent years. Ebba Nikka's ideas started with a simple tweet she posted after it emerged that there had been a number of sexual offenses reported at the 2017 Bråvalla festival in Norrköping. What do you think about putting together a really cool festival or where only non-men are welcome that will run until all men have learned how to behave themselves, she wrote. Though some weren't thrilled with the idea, others started to respond with words of support. Medical workers, PR people, project managers, and musicians got in touch to offer their services, and soon enough people had registered interest for the comedian to start thinking seriously about making the festival happen. A day after her initial tweet, Nykare confirmed that plans were in place for an event in 2018. Sweden's first man-free rock festival will see the light next summer. In the coming days, I'll bring together a solid group of talented organizers and project leaders to form the or festival organizers that you'll hear from everyone again when it's time to move forward, close quote. This is the prevailing narrative that the issue is just the problem is just because there are men at the festival. It's never even and in some cases, particularly this Nika individual, it just seems that they genuinely believe it. It never crosses their mind that maybe, just maybe, there is a little bit more to the story. It just never crosses their mind. And as for this Man-Free Festival, I really hope they do organize it. I have friends in Norrköping. I hope she organizes it there, and I will try my best to be there and I'll go with the camera and breach their ban. What are they gonna do? Call the police?
Yeah, I mean,
If not,
obviously you identify as an attack helicopter, so you're obviously a non-man.
yeah, obviously. I mean, I'm not joking with this. If they organize this, I'm gonna try my best to be there. And I'll go with the camera and breach their ban. What are they going to do? It's not like Swedish police women are known to be very efficient with restraining anyone, so I can play rugby with them if I really want to. That's one thing. And second thing, seriously, what are they going to do? And besides, what I'm really interested in, that's something that I really want to ask them. Does the ban on men include, the men who actually have to set up the stage, the men who actually have to take care with the sound, and things that are usually very, very lacking in female participation. These kinds of professions tend to have very, very few women in them.
Yeah, somehow I'm doubtful about that.
But in any event, I really hope she does organize it, and I really hope I can be there to breach their ban. I really want to I don't know, to advance on the scale of most hated people in Sweden, because I was really disappointed when the previous hate list was compiled and I wasn't on it. And I was very disappointed by that. I mean, come on, I've been writing hateful stuff in Swedish and about Sweden for so many years, and you didn't include me on your hate list. Now I really need to up my game on that. Right. Let's go to the last one, which is pretty much connected to the previous two pieces of news coming from Nyheter Idag. The government wants to restrict the freedom of the press, opens the possibility for a ban on writing about criminal immigrants. The government is preparing for changes to the constitution and hopes to get through the restriction on freedom of the press and freedom of expression. It is apparent from a legislative council that Fria Tider attempts to pay attention to. The government wants the changed media regulations to come into force on January the 1st, 2019. News articles that contain personal information about, quote, ethnic origin, skin color, or other similar relationships, political opinions, religious or philosophical beliefs, or information that, quote, an individual has committed other offenses or crimes, or was convicted in criminal proceedings, or has been subject to criminal proceedings, may in the future be banned in Sweden. Such opinions, news articles, or news stories on television should not enjoy the protection of the Free Speech Amendment, at least not if the red-green government gets what it wants. Previously, similar exceptions in the press freedom provisions have been granted for, among other things, child pornography and advertising for tobacco and alcohol. Now the government wants to introduce more prohibitions and thus politically be able to control what newspapers and other media receive and report. Fria Tider interprets this as saying that the government wants to legislate against so-called alternative media and not least prohibit them from reporting gross violent crime where people with foreign backgrounds are perpetrators. But the law is against everyone, not just the alternative media. Several heavy referral bodies oppose the changes that the government wishes to introduce. The Ministry of Press, Radio and Television, the Faculty of Law at Uppsala University, Sveriges Radio, SVT, the Swedish Journalists Association, and the newspaper publishers are some of them. The Court of Appeal over in Skåne and Blekinge goes so far as to compare the proposal with political motivated censorship. The government also wishes to limit the protection of certain search services containing personal data of a particular integrity-sensitive character. It is in an action that is expected to run against the Lexbase internet service, where anyone can search legislative acts and judicial orders via the internet. Verifiera AB, which stands behind the Lexbase service, is one of the referral bodies that have been heard, and the company protests against the government trying to ban their business. Verifiera receives support from the Faculty of Humanities at Stockholm University, the Faculty of Law at Uppsala University, and the Publicists Club, which warns that the foundation project is gradually eroded. The Chancellor of Justice, the Data Inspectorate, the Faculty Board of Law at Stockholm University, and Sweden's Law Society instead support the government side. The next step in the legislative chain will be to formulate a bill that the Riksdag may take a stand for. Since it is about a change in the constitution, the Riksdag must vote yes to the bill twice with an intermediate parliamentary election. This is done to enable voters to say no to the new constitution by voting in favor of the political parties that do not support the changes. The government hopes that the new law will come into force on January the 1st, 2019. So there you have it. Let's change the constitution because too many people are speaking the truth in the press.
Never go full Sweden.
Never go full Sweden. I mean, just when Canada was becoming a little bit more retarded than Sweden, and saying, well, it seems that Canada is starting to win the competition of who is more retarded. Then comes this piece of news, and I'm like, yeah, no, no, amazing, and it really boggles one's mind. I mean, at this point, this is what I keep saying to my Swedish friends. If you guys don't vote for a 50% Sweden Democrats government due in the next elections, you guys are fucked. I mean, they're really, really fucked in all imaginable and unimaginable way, because nobody else seems to be willing to even consider that. Hold on a second, maybe we're progressing too fast. Maybe we're not, let's wait and see. Let's have a little bit of an actual debate over these things. Nobody seems to be even remotely trying to consider these things.
So if I understand things correctly, if you write, let's say, a newspaper article where you mention someone's ethnicity or religion or something, that would be illegal. Have I got that right?
Especially if that someone is a criminal, yes.
Okay.
And also, so for instance, if you have individuals that are not committing a crime now, but they have also been, serving time for another crime, either in Sweden or somewhere else, and you say, look, this individual, here's his picture, has been caught by the police whilst, I don't know, let's say raping someone. this individual also served time for rape in, let's say, the United Kingdom between, I don't know, 2001 and 2005, for instance. Such an article would become completely illegal because it breaches both the portion where it says the ethnicity, because you show their picture, and also that the person was involved in criminal proceedings in the past. You're not supposed to say these things anymore. Which I'm sorry, but sorry, go ahead, please.
So, if, for example, ISIS commits some sort of terrorist act in Sweden, do Swedish media just have to like not mention that it is connected to ISIS or that it might have something to do with Islam?
They can say it is connected to ISIS because ISIS is a known terrorist organization, but no, they can't say it has anything to do with Islam.
I mean, ISIS is the Islamic State.
No, I'm not saying it's. I'm not saying it makes sense. I'm. But yeah, no, they can say that it's connected to ISIS, but they can't say it has something to do with Islam, and they can't say that, I don't know, the perpetrators were Iraqi or whatever. They have to pretend that it could have just as well be an average Swedish guy. Välkommen till Sverige. Amazing. And
because,
again, go ahead, please.
Because the average Lutheran, a-religious Swede is just the sort of person who would, commit suicide bombing, for example. That's happens all the time.
Of course. And I actually met in real life Swedes who actually believe that. You can imagine. I mean, it's very, very hard if you're coming from a normal place such as a country of the intermarium. It's very hard to interact with these kinds of people because all I could do is just face palm constantly. I'm like, no, this you can't be serious. And the individual was very serious, and I've met more than one. There are lots of individuals, admittedly, definitely not a majority in Sweden, but there are plenty of them, God damn it, who actually do believe that. That the terrorism is not something that is overwhelmed or even predominantly about Islam in Sweden. No, it could just as easily be your average Lutheran or a religious individual from across the across the street, even though the obvious data shows that that's simply not the case.
Yeah, you're just supposed to pretend that it just varies independently, and if you don't, you're a bigot, and therefore
basically yes. Yeah. If you quote statistics in public, you can be labeled a bigot. And it happened including to an individual. His name is Tino Sanandaji. The guy is Iranian. He emigrated to Sweden right when the Islamist revolution started in Iran. He's very old now. And it happened to him. He was called a racist bigot because he quoted statistics from the Central Statistics Bureau. I mean, it's not like so yeah, basically can happen. And now they're going to enshrine that into the constitution and limit the press from reporting statistics or from reporting anything that's got to do with previous criminal convictions or ethnicity or race or whatever. And it just this is what is astonishing to me, because of course there are those who don't really believe into this thing, but it's profitable for them to be like that, to be activists like that, as Joachim told me in the interview that everyone can see on my channel. So there are obviously those who don't really believe in these kinds of things. They're in it for the money. But there are also the ones who, the true believers, and there are so many of those who genuinely believe that the only reason you would want the right to print in your newspaper the race of the perpetrator or the ethnicity or the previous criminal convictions of the perpetrator, the only reason you would want that is because you're a Nazi bigot. And they genuinely believe that.
Oh my God.
Right. So, 2 minutes over time. Considering how long the news section was, it's still good. It's still very, very, very decent. All right. So next week we're not gonna have a show because I'm busy. But 2 weeks from now, July the 21st, we'll be back here, probably with a similarly long news section, although probably a little bit smaller, so it won't go again a few minutes over time. And with that, I'm pretty much out of things to say, but I'm sure Jon has a few more things to add.
Yeah, so in the 2 week interim, I would invite you to check out my blog, which is at orthogonalideas.com, where I cover a variety of topics. For example, recently I put up a post arguing that the American Revolution was a mistake because I like to stay non-controversial. So if that sort of thing interests you, you can find that at orthogonalideas.com, one word. And I guess we'll see you in 2 weeks. Until then, take the red pill.
Take the red pill. Goodbye, everyone.